Hello, welcome to another episode of Sewing in Scripture. Today, we're going to be reading through the book of Esther, chapters 3 and 4. So, if you're following along with us, I am reading from the NIV version of the Bible. And when I do our reviews on what we've just read, I'm reading from the King James Study Bible. So, a little bit of reference for you. If you want to go ahead and grab your Bible app or grab your physical Bible and join us, go ahead and turn to the book of Esther in the Old Testament, chapter 3. And while you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and hear a testimony from our sponsor. So I was just at the grocery store and I was at the checkout, and the lady, the cashier behind the register, stopped me and she said, "Oh my gosh." She goes, "I have to tell you something." Okay. She said 20 years ago, she went to a church, and she didn't know Jesus at the time. She didn't know anything about, she knew the basics that most people have an idea about, but she really didn't know God. And she said that she was praying, she was walking through the church and she was praying, "God, please show me a sign that there's somebody out there for me, that I belong somewhere." And she said she rounded the corner and she had this vision. She was shown this. 20 years ago, she saw this. Now, this is, I designed this not too long ago, like within the past 5 months. But she said that was the image I saw. And God was telling me, "I am the Lion of Judah, and there is someone for everyone. I am for everyone." And she felt just so compelled that she had to come up and share that story with me about how she found God and how she has found peace through Christ, just having the knowledge that God is the Lion of Judah, that this is the Lion of Judah, that this is, the Lion and the Lamb. It's all about God. It's all about Christ. It's all about Him, and He is for everyone. We are not alone. And that just really hit me. So once again, please visit our sponsor, foxthepatriot.com. They do support the channel. So if you are enjoying these videos, please go ahead and give us a like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell. Let us know that you are here, and the notification bell will let you know whenever we drop a new video, so you're not missing out on anything. So, what are we talking about today? The book of Esther, and we're going to start in chapter 3. But first, we're going to do a quick recap of what we learned so far from chapters 1 and 2. So if you haven't been following along and you're just joining us, we're going to give you a quick synopsis of what we've gone over so far. So, in a drunken state, King Xerxes banished Queen Vashti for disobedience. The Persian princes suggested the king find a new wife among the virgins of the empire because they didn't want to give him one of their daughters. Esther is brought to the palace and went through a 12-month preparation process before meeting the king. This was not just Esther, it was a whole harem of women, but we are following the story of Esther. Esther impresses the king and is chosen to be the queen. Mordecai, who is Esther's guardian and cousin, overhears a plot to assassinate the king and tells Esther. Esther reports the plot to the king and credits Mordecai with the intel. Mordecai's name is then written in the king's chronicles as someone deserving of reward. So now let's jump into chapter 3 and see where our story is going to lead us. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. The reference to the Agagite is reminiscent of the story in 1 Samuel chapter 15, when Samuel is reprimanded for sparing the king Agag. Later, one of his descendants killed Saul. Haman was like his predecessor in that he did not fear God. All the royal officials in the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor.
So Jews customarily bowed before their kings, but when Persians bowed before their kings, they paid homage to them as if they were a divine being, so as though they were a god. The Spartans refused to bow down before Xerxes for this very reason. As a faithful Jew, Mordecai could not give such honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is, the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. According to many, the subject of the origin of the Feast of Purim is the main theme of this book. Early in April 474 BC, Haman had the astrologers and magicians cast the lots to determine which day of the year would bring destruction to Israel. Little did he realize that when the lot is cast into the lap, the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. So he's throwing his lot to see when things are going to happen, but he doesn't realize that God's in control of that too. The lot fell on the 12th month, February to March, which not only gave Haman time to prepare, but also in the overruling province of God gave the Jews time to thwart his plan. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Haman is careful to integrate himself with the king by appearing to be motivated only by the king's profit. In effect, he offers the king a bribe, which he expected to raise by confiscating the property of the Jews, 10,000 talents of silver, or about 12 million ounces. The king was not even interested enough to inquire who the people were, so he gave Haman his signet ring. With this seal of executive power, Haman would be able to send letters in the king's name. The king's utter indifference to the fate of millions of his subjects has found modern-day parallels in Hitler, Stalin, and Khrushchev. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king of satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so that they would be ready for that day. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. The date in verse 12 was memorable to any Jew because it was the day before the slaying of the Passover lamb, as seen in Exodus 12:6. Was God able to save his people now as he had done in the past? Well, that's where we're leaving off in chapter 3. Now let's move on ahead to chapter 4 and see where this progresses. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. These customs were attested in widely separated Old Testament periods and were practiced by other nations as well as Israel. The law against wearing sackcloth in the king's gate is not otherwise attested, but it is intrinsically credible, as in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 2. Fasting was normally by prayers in which Jews would have called upon God for deliverance. Thus, God's intervention results. Even though his name is not mentioned, it is implied. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hatach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hatach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Because remember, he's going to plunder all the Jews' stuff too, take all their money, and offer to pay it to the king, almost like a bribe. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain to her. And he told him to instruct her to go to the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hatach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." So access to the king was strictly limited, since he needed to be protected both from attempts on his life and from vexation with people's problems. Even his wife had no right to approach. That she had not been called for 30 days is just one more indication of how abnormal life was in the palace of Susa. Mordecai's response put pressure on Esther, as he reminded her that she risked death whether she approached the king or not. So there were 3 lines to his argument. Esther herself will not be exempt from the destruction under this edict, because as we all know, she's a Jew, so she has been marked for death regardless. He reveals his own conviction that God will not permit the extinction of his people. If Esther fails, God will find another way. The outcome of her decision is so far-reaching that, without exaggeration, she is now at the very moment when her life's purpose is at stake. So again, he tells her, you may have been called for a time such as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Esther's reply is also a confession of faith, as she implied that she accepts the suggestion of Mordecai as her duty, but that she is full of apprehension at the thought of fulfilling it. Her statement, "And if I perish," is not a blind fatalism or a hopeless resignation, but rather a confidence in God's will and wisdom. So she's saying, I'm kind of scared to do this, but I'm going to trust in God. And doesn't that seem to be the case with so many of us, especially those of us who are trying to walk in our faith and God calls us to do something and it scares us to no end to do that thing, and we have to step out on that faith and say, I don't know what, I don't know what your vision is, God. I don't know what you're calling me to do this. I'm scared to do this, but I know that your ways are not my ways and I'm not meant to understand, and I will trust what you have planned for me as the end result, whatever that may be. So, something to think about, something to ponder. Are you having things that you feel God is calling you to do, but they scare you to no end? This is your opportunity. Step out on faith. So I hope you're enjoying these Bible studies. I hope you're sharing them with others too. Maybe having others watch them with you, use them as a Bible study tool, or if you're just enjoying them sitting back on your couch, watching them alone, that's okay too. I hope God is speaking to you in some way through these Bible studies, planting those little seeds like we need to be doing for others. So once again, visit our sponsor, please, foxthepatriot.com. They do support the channel, and if you're enjoying the content, that will help keep us going. Once again, have a wonderful and blessed day, and we will see you next week for chapters 5 and 6, where things are really getting good. Have a great week. May God bless you.